Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to Women's Hoops and Talks, the What Podcast, where we are elevating the voice of women in basketball. I am Tara Bowen-Biggs, and today I am joined by Cassidy Gemmet. Cassidy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Excited about this season so far.
Can you believe that it's not even been a month since opening night?
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, because it was October 18th. Right? And today we're recording this on November 13th. It hasn't even been a month.
It feels like it's been like a year, and I love it.
I know. I feel like so much has happened. So let's start with that. I mean, in 3.5, 4 short weeks, what are some of the things that have stood out to you about this season?
Well, Jimmy Butler finally found a home where he's not mad about it, I guess. I mean, he could still be mad. I don't know. But he at least found a home and had another wonderful back to a new team opening press conference, which he's so good at.
I've not seen the press conference yet. You want to reenact it for me?
I didn't watch the whole thing, but he is just so good at it. And I can never forget how good he was at it in Minnesota when he gave out his personal phone number. So I'm just thinking he's really good at these press conferences, and then we just have to wait and see. I don't trust anything anymore.
Were you surprised at how long it took? I was shocked at how long it took to find him a new place.
I honestly can't believe that it had to happen during the season. I'm surprised it didn't happen preseason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Me too. And I'm glad everybody can move on. I'm also very surprised that Minnesota actually got something, because if I was a GM for a team, I would have been like, I'm not giving you anything. Be like, you are in a bad place right now. And I guess that's why I'm not a GM. But I don't know. I felt like they got a good couple of pieces that, I don't think it's going to get worse in Minnesota than it was.
No.
Right.
No.
Right. We've already also had fights resulting in suspensions this season. Of course, the classic Rondo Chris Paul fight, which it was just like, is this real? Is this what was that, the first week of the season, and we already got that? Like, that's premium content. That's like pay-per-view content, and it was just like being handed to us like candy.
Yeah, I could not believe that was happening so soon. I was like, what is happening? This isn't the playoffs. Like, how are we already punching each other?
I know. How is anybody this into it, right? Already. Amazing. Well, and even there's already infighting in teams as well. And I don't want to delight in anybody's, discomfort. We've already known that things were in Washington between Bradley Beal and John Wall have not been great. But again, just breaking today, apparently there is strife in the locker room with the Golden State Warriors. The perfect team is apparently, I don't know, do they have cracks in them now?
I think possibly. I don't know. I think maybe there's some amping up going on. I think Draymond and DeMarcus both have very similar abilities to amp themselves up. I think part of that is definitely that they lost to the Clippers last night, and that can't feel good.
Yeah, actually, let help me step through like what's actually going on there, because I had a busy day today and I couldn't keep up with all of the notifications that were coming in about this, because Woj was like all over out in front of about this. So the Clippers, who turns out are a fun team to watch this year.
No, it's amazing.
They beat the Golden State Warriors last night, and the last play, Draymond took the ball and went down the court and decided to take care of it on his own instead of passing it to Kevin Durant. And I don't know if it was like the very last play, but it was definitely at the end, right?
It was the last play of the game, and it was clear Durant was calling for the ball. Green proceeded to go up the court with it as Durant is calling for the ball and basically loses the ball. No last chance to win the game, and they go immediately into overtime,
and
where they lose.
Oh, and that took them into overtime where they lost. Oh, so it was prolonged a little bit longer.
Yeah, it was
5
prolonged
minutes longer.
And there was definitely a fight on the bench at that point. DeMarcus seemed to be trying to calm Draymond down. Everybody else is trying to calm Durant down. Klay Thompson is just sitting there laughing to himself. It was quite wonderful. Apparently, then that continued in the locker room, where Draymond proceeded to consistently call.
There was some name calling.
Some names.
The B word, name calling.
Yes, multiple B words, as I have heard. And then Golden State released today that they've suspended Draymond without pay for a game.
For $120,000 he's gonna lose over this. So the whole thing is so bizarre that I'm just like, is this really happening, or is there something else? Because remember, this is a team that was so good and so superior that they had to go and have a practice with Harlem Globetrotters because regular practice isn't stimulating enough for them. So part of me wonders how much of this is a show. Part of me wonders how much of it is that it's just like we're all just so thirsty for stories about anything possibly going slightly awry. It's just so unusual that I have a hard time really taking it at face value. What about you?
Yeah, I feel like there is a sliver of truth in just about everything, but I feel like this is overblown. And possibly a lot of people very excited about watching Golden State fail.
Yeah.
Which, I'm a little on that bandwagon as well. So I can't complain too much. But, I think that the media is probably overblowing it a bit. But I think we're going to need to watch the storyline as the season progresses to see if maybe there are bigger cracks than we thought.
Well, and there's also so much media right now covering Golden State that they got to make something happen, right? I mean, there's just sheer volume of reporters in the Bay Area covering that team anymore that somebody's got to try to write the next story that is the most interesting, that's going to, get the most views. It's all very very complicated. But before we move on, we talked about excellent teams that may have cracks in them, but there's actually also some teams that are surprising. So we mentioned the Clippers. The Blazers played the Clippers, and the Blazers won, but that was a fun, competitive game. That was just fun basketball to watch.
It was. It was a really fun game to watch. The whole time I'm thinking, how is this so close against the Clippers? But then you're watching them play, and you're like, they're playing well.
Yeah.
They're being coached well. I think maybe getting rid of Austin Rivers was helpful to a certain extent.
Well, and just kind of bringing in guys who, just want to prove that they're good basketball players. And then Bobby and Toby, Um, Boban, I can't remember his last name, Maranovic. I'm not sure his last name. The 7'3" is that? He's huge.
Yeah.
And he can dunk without like leaving his feet, but he looks like he's enjoying himself so much.
I do like watching players who like look happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, because he's like, it's just, it's clearly hard for him to move his giant frame up and down the court, but he just really looks like he's having a good time doing it. And there's just a lot of players out there that are just balling out and having a fun time this year. We've got offense just, crazy high.
Yeah. The defense,
But it's not. I don't even think it's that the defense is that bad.
Yeah, I guess the offense is just so fast paced with so many teams this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that it comes off as maybe people aren't playing defense when you look at scores, but then you watch the games and you're like, no, there's defense happening.
Well, I looked at I was reading some article because I was writing you and I did it together, worked on the preview for the Laker game, and I came across some article where the author said something about holding, the Blazers or the Lakers had much improved defense and they had held them to a blistering 104 points. And I was like, that's not what I would consider great defense, but I guess when you look at how much people are scoring these days, that isn't that bad.
I think going into that game, LA was averaging opponents scoring something like, I want to say it was like 119, but don't quote me on that.
Well, so when they got Tyson Chandler, everything turned around. I just was looking it up. I know it was a big drop in their defensive rating. Their defensive rating had been like 111 and then it dropped way down to like 97, I think, something like that. But the other thing that's kind of surprising this year, and going back to Jimmy Butler, is that like we already have players are changing teams already, and that just seems like it's something that doesn't usually happen till later, because there's a whole slew of guys who can't change teams until December 15th, which is when players who were signed this year can then be moved. I believe that's the rule, right? And
I think we're going to be heading for possibly watching players try to move later in the season too.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's going to be, and we haven't even brought up Melo.
Oh my gosh.
That is just, I don't even know where to go with that, because we had an earlier What podcast where I went and talked to people from every fan base who Melo has played for. And it was so interesting because, we get the national perspective and we get like whatever is the most popular narrative that floats up to the top or whatever. But I went and talked to fans who remember what it was like in Denver before he got there and how much he meant to that franchise. And then when he went to New York, and for a time in New York, things went well, or at least the fans wanted things to go well. Yeah. And like, there's all this optimism every time a new player comes in, and sometimes that optimism is overblown and it's just because you're a fan and you want things to go really well. But also sometimes it's like that sort of clean slate thing. Like we're going to start anew and give you a chance to start over again if things didn't end up well where you were. So it was just a really interesting glimpse, because people all have opinions about Melo. And I always thought it was so weird. Everyone's like Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony. And then the next sentence is about something about like, that, he's a train wreck or whatever. And like those two things are just so far apart. And I think what it all is that Melo's struggling. He had an amazing college career. He set the world on fire when he was in the Olympics. He had some really great years in the NBA, but now he's struggling with what's next and adopting, the attitude that he needs to take to be able to prolong his career. But it's gotten so sensational with, all of the immediate coverage about everything. And so now every time he does one thing, it's just like, people are throwing flames and then the players are jumping on and they're defending him, and it's just like
it's just so much to handle. And I actually respect the way that Houston seems to be dealing with it right now, is just making sure that they know, like, not getting rid of him. Like, they're putting that statement out there. But, I mean, there's only so long you can hide talks with other teams.
Yeah.
There's only so long.
Yeah.
So I think that is his future is definitely in jeopardy with Houston.
Yeah. Well, real quick about the Blazers, because we're both Blazer fans. What's the thing that has surprised you the most about the team this year? And boy, there are so many things I would say that I could mention.
The bench.
Yeah.
I didn't expect the bench to be as ready as quickly as they have been. Mm-hmm. I thought this bench could definitely get to this place where they're a really quality second team and there's no real rush to put the first team back in. But I thought we'd at least need a month or two to see that take place. And I think watching it happen so quickly really speaks to the leadership of the team, both coaching wise and from those key leading players like Dame, to give them the confidence that they need to be a great second team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that Evan Turner sat them down at the beginning of the year and was like, I'm going to get you guys paid, mm-hmm. because Nick Stauskas, Seth Curry, they're on short-term deals, either team option or player option, but they're not here for very long. And the idea is that they could easily be gone quickly. And the better that they do this year, the better that they will do down the road. And I just think, well, and even, Jake Layman is getting close to the point where his rookie contract is going to be over. So I think he's like, look, I know you guys have a lot of talent and you stick with me, I'm going to get you paid. And they're like, okay. And they're just they play like they're all in. I love it. Mm-hmm. And I think watching ET coach in the basketball tournament this summer also, I think, gave him a little bit more confidence to help lead that second team. Because he got to coach one of the teams that did really well this summer in that tournament. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I forgot about that. He was the coach of the basketball tournament team. Yeah. So yeah, things are looking pretty good in Blazerland right now. But we had talked about having a discussion today about the media, because it's like all of these stories, all this drama that is going on. One of the things that I've really felt this year is that the media has started to become kind of its own personality and its own storyline in terms of, who's breaking what. And, Woj is, I feel like, his own character. He's like a character now. He's not a reporter, right? Oh, yeah. He is larger than he's larger than life, really. Like, he's Woj. Mm-hmm. He's not even a person anymore. He's just that. I mean, he is a person, but he's got that overall presence in the NBA where you're just like looking to see what Woj is going to say. Yeah. It's like an almighty being. Yeah. Yeah. He's, and then, there's other people who are like, following, like Shams, who are kind of following along in the and guys like, Bill Simmons, who's been around for a super long time. Like, he kind of is a media personality and, beyond, sports reporting. So it's weird because there's this sort of mishmash of like personalities who talk about sports, but then there's also this like rich selection of places where you can go to get information. There are so many places. Yeah. So what are some of your favorite places to go for basketball info? Because I know that you are like me, a junkie and online all the time, yes. Looking at stuff. I think my go-to is probably Bleacher Report, because there's so many, it's just a compiled place of so many different sources. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I like to do with my Bleacher Report is I add teams to my favorites about a week before the Blazers are going to play them. Oh. So I get to start seeing their local stories about them and national stories about them and, fans' tweets about them and all of that. And so that's a fun way to get to kind of preview teams before the Blazers get to match up against them. And so you kind of go into the game with a little bit more knowledge. And I think Bleacher Report's a big one for me. One of the ones that I really love is Players Tribune. Mm-hmm. Just getting a different perspective that's
about the game and then also frequently beyond the game and just being a professional athlete and what that means. What are some of your favorites?
So one of my daily rituals is I subscribe to Tom Ziller's Good Morning It's Basketball newsletter, and he works for SB Nation, but he compiles news from all different sources, including SB Nation sources like Blazers Edge. Although I'm not sure I've ever seen Blazers Edge in there, but anyway, we'll get there. No, he has been in there because I remember I've congratulated writers on being in the newsletter. But anyway, it comes out at like 6:00 every morning. Good Morning It's Basketball. And if I read nothing else, if I don't have time for anything else, I read like the 10 articles or 8 to 10 articles that he links to in there, and he gives a good summary, a good narrative of like what you're going to get, and it's just always such a good recap of whatever just happened the night before. So they do all of the, he has links to all the game recaps if all you want to do is just watch the game stuff. But then he also has like the top features that have been in there. So I love the Good Morning It's Basketball newsletter. And there's a couple podcasts that I really like. The Open Floor podcast, which is by Sports Illustrated, and it's Andrew Sharp and Ben Golliver, Portland's own Ben Golliver.
Nice.
And that's a fun podcast. Ben, one of the reasons I really like it is because Ben, along with this guy named Rob Mahoney, are the guys who do the top 100 rankings. And so it's constantly something that they refer to when they're talking about it, like how they came up with the top 100 rankings and where somebody ended up in the rankings. And it's interesting to just see the thought behind it, because, everybody kind of has like a notion of who's a good player, who's a really good player, who's the top tier player. But these guys spend all summer, coming up with their rubric and writing it down. And it's just interesting to see it crop up. Like today they were like, Ben Golliver was saying something about, see why we left Kyle Kuzma off the top 100 list. Right after like Andrew Sharp had like pointed out somebody that had gotten like way artificially up way too high. But I like that. What are some other ones that you like?
I love watching local broadcast announcers for different teams. That's something that I'm mildly obsessed with. And I don't have League Pass yet. But I watch a lot of them on NBA TV and a lot of the reruns of games, and I just love getting to know different announcing teams.
And who are some of your favorites?
I absolutely
besides
love
the Blazers, of course.
Okay, the Blazers. But I love the Indiana broadcast team. They are delightful. They're so Indiana. They love their community. They love basketball. They are true Pacer fans from an early age. They are just, whenever they cut to them on the screen, they just look so happy to be there. And it's amazing. And I love them. The team is made up of Chris Denari, who's the play-by-play announcer. And he's been doing it for, I think, about 13 years there. He's also done the announcing for the Fever as well. Raised in Indiana, coached by his dad in high school. Quinn Buckner is amazing. Probably my favorite part of that team. He played in the NBA for 10 years, coached with Dallas. But one of the best facts about him is he is one of 3 people in history of basketball to win a championship on every level: high school, college, Olympics, and the NBA. I need to research who the other people are. But I read that and I was like, that is amazing. He was also the captain of the 1976 gold medal winning Olympic basketball team. And he is great, and he finds great delight in the little things. Like frequently a coach will make a funny face and he will sit there and laugh for a minute, and it is amazing. And they will go, we're going to cut in to hear the sounds of the game. And then they're all quiet for like 3 minutes while you just listen to the basketball game and the squeaking shoes. And
that's cool.
I love watching the Indiana team broadcast team, so everyone should watch them. Jeremiah Johnson, their sideline reporter, this is his dream job. Admittedly, he loves the Pacers. He remembers playing with his YMCA team on the Pacers court in 1985, and it's one of his favorite memories. They were like one of like the teams that played like after the game or during halftime or whatever. So I highly recommend watching the Indiana team.
That is so cute. Brooke Olsendam was with Indiana for a really short time. I think she and Evan Turner were there at the same time, or she might have been there. She may have been there for a couple of years before she came out west. But when you were talking about the analysts for Indiana and how when they were just like quiet and they just sat and listened, I just love the idea of that. It's like, going out into your backyard and listening, to the crickets chirping or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it reminded me of the other night in the Blazer game. In the game against the Celtics at halftime, there was a delay because of the rim. And so Kevin Calabro and Lamar Hurd had to pass the time talking about it, and I was at the game, so I didn't hear what they were saying, but I came home and my husband was watching it, and Nick Stauskas was being interviewed. He was doing play-by-play, so he came over and put his headphones on, but then while he was doing it, Terry Stotts came up to him and shook his head no, we're not doing that.
My favorite part was Lamar doing a play-by-play of them bringing ladders on the court and being how tall they thought the ladders were.
You think that's a 10-foot tall ladder? An 8-foot tall ladder?
And then they got confirmation about how tall the ladders were. It was wonderful.
Well, I guess that's what you hire for, is people who can fill that time.
Absolutely.
Well, and then so to one last thing about the media before we cut to our interview with Anne Peterson, who we're gonna bring on to talk about how media has changed for a while, is that so there's lots of places where you can get the stories, you can get aggregation of stories and things like that, and then there's also all the statistics sites. And I didn't grow up playing the game. I grew up playing soccer, and that was my first love. And so I came to basketball later, and I've been a fan for a long time, but it's only in the last 5 years or so that I've been trying to really study the game and learn the game. And fortunately, there's a bunch of really great resources for that too. YouTube is amazing for learning different plays and how plays work and how different types of offenses work, how different defenses work. So I watched the B-ball breakdown. They have some really useful videos that chalk talky, for if you're trying to figure out for a couple summers ago, I was like, what is ice? I don't understand what ice is when, I still don't completely understand it, because I think it's a pretty fluid thing. I think with this team, ice is this thing, and with this team, it's that thing. And I don't think it's a very specific thing, but YouTube was great for helping me get a hold on of what ice is. And then there's another stats site that it's a subscription site. It's not a very big subscription, but it's called Cleaning the Glass. And I don't know if you've ever used that before.
I haven't.
But it's really cool. The guy who started it actually used to work for the Trailblazers. He was on staff. I can't remember what his job, if he was this, an analytics guy for the Blazers or whatever, but he now has built this whole site, and including building this really cool I guess application or website that shows stats in a really unique way, because he tries to show the stats in context. So when you look at someone's numbers right next to their points per game or rebounds per game or whatever, there's a ranking of where they rate with relationship to other players who are in their position. So if you're looking at a center and his center's rebounds, you see where he is in the percentile among all of the centers in the league. So, he might be a center and he might get 5 rebounds, and you aren't paying attention to what position you're playing. You're thinking, 5 rebounds. But then you go, oh, wait, he's a center. And then you see with only 5 rebounds, he's not way up there.
Oh, wow. I'm going to need to subscribe to that for fantasy really basketball alone.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, he writes kind of some behind the scenes narratives about just from his time when he was working for the league, like what it's like on draft night. And he encourages the people who subscribe to the site to submit ideas for like questions that you want to know, and he'll write stuff. And he wrote a piece called that was about how he learned how to watch tape. And, you know, he had some job that was like not the pinnacle of what his position was while he was there. It was a lower ranking position where he had just gotten his foot in the door. And he was helping this guy watch tape, and he just sat there and learned how to watch tape. And I was like, this is so fascinating. So anyway, Cleaning the Glass is another one of those sites that's got a completely different type of information than maybe you would get 20 years ago when you were just trying to like look at the box score and find out what happened in the game, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely. That sounds like a very interesting perspective.
Well, and I guess how has the way that you consume media and information about basketball and the NBA, how has that changed for you over the last, like, I don't know, 5 years or so?
I feel like a lot of it has changed in the way that I'm getting a lot of it on my phone. So I can get alerts about teams. I can be very involved and know what's happening in a more immediate way than I've ever been able to really do, which is pretty cool because I can even sit at a game and be checking stats at halftime or during a timeout, or checking what people are saying about the game. And I think it changes the way I both watch the game, but also the way I process a game afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really great point, that because sometimes when you're in the arena, on the one hand, it's cool to just like throw yourself completely into the game.
Yeah.
But then like when Damian Lillard tweaks his knee and he sits down and you're like, oh no, or like Stauskas goes to the room, or, you know, the locker room or whatever, but you know that you can like go check on your phone and find out what's going on. It's, on the one hand, it takes a little bit away from like the immediacy of watching the game, but then you can just go home and watch it over again.
Yeah. And it also stops me from texting everyone I know who's not at the game to ask them if they're watching the game to tell me what's happening with the injuries, because I have a few friends who are like, please stop doing that.
That's funny. Well, should we go ahead and introduce our talk with Anne?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of summarize it, and then we'll play it?
Yeah. So we're going to talk to we talked to Anne Peterson from the Associated Press about the way sports media has changed in her time of 30 years of being a reporter, and the ways that the media has changed the game. And also a little ditty about LeBron James that's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, it's great. Love talking to Anne because she's been around and seen a lot, and she just has great perspectives on things. So let's go ahead and play it. We have asked back to join us on the show, second time What Podcast guest, Anne Peterson, who works for the Associated Press. She has been covering sports for the AP for 30 years, and she's been in the Northwest since 2002. She's got a wide-ranging view of sports around here. She's covered the Trailblazers, the Timbers, the Thorns, the Ducks, and the Beavers. And we are excited to talk to you tonight, Anne.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
Well, Cassidy and I are trying to wrap our head around just how big media has become and how many options there are for people who want to learn more about sports, follow sports, talk about sports, etc. And we wanted to call you in and find out some of the things that you've observed or learned over all the years that you've been covering sports around here. So our first question, super basic, but it could be maybe a long answer, which is, how has sports media changed since you started as a reporter?
Well, so when I started in the late 80s in Boston, Massachusetts, and there was no internet. So you relied on radio, television, and newspapers, and on a more limited sense, magazines for, your media consumption. And AP served, at that point, AP was almost like the first internet, because we were a wire service. And so our information was transmitted over the wires and went to every newspaper across the country and internationally.
Wait, can you tell me specifically what you mean by over the wire, what that means?
So we're a wire service. So in the days when we all had, hardline phone lines, the AP signal was transmitted over that wire, or in years before that, the teletype. So that's how, it came into every newspaper's offices, and then it would get set into type and printed in the newspaper. Does that make sense?
So would you call it in and dictate it, or would you type it up on a machine?
Well, yeah, there were actually computers when I started. I had a laptop when I started covering the Boston Red Sox, and I had a laptop, and it was a Tandy laptop. You could only see 65 characters on the screen at a time.
Oh my goodness.
And you transmitted it. You transmitted your story over a regular telephone. You had these rubber couplers that went on the mouthpiece and the earpiece of the telephone, and then you would dial a number and you would hear beeps and you would hit a button and it would transmit over the phone lines. And so but those machines were we called them trash 80s, because you could kind of fix them with a fork if you needed to. But they were really reliable too. I've actually seen people find them at garage sales and say they plug them into a hard telephone line and you can still get them to work.
Amazing.
So yeah, so they were cool. They were really cool. So the thing about being in sports media in those days is because you didn't have the resources of the internet, you really had to do everything yourself. Now teams spoon feed you stuff, and there's all kinds of Google searches you can do, and there's databases that you can access. But when I started, I had to know my teams really well. And I did all of those box scores, the NBA basketball box scores. I did those by hand.
You sat there and watched the game and was one assist, one pass, or one rebound.
Yeah. Yes. And then I would and then I would type those into a computer and transmit those. And so I learned quickly, I learned quickly what every single number in all those box scores mean. And that was great for a starting out reporter, because you had to figure out you had to figure out batting averages by hand, so that was the great thing about, coming up through my generation, because it was really you learned aspects of your jobs that people today don't necessarily know how to do. But when the internet came, that kind of changed everything. And we all know that it really changed the newspaper industry. And I think that a lot of people now, because it's so specialized, it's nice for consumers to be able to say, okay, I'm a huge Blazers fan, and I want all of my stories to be, I want all of the media that I consume to be Blazers centric. So I'm going to go to a site like Blazers Edge, right? Mm-hmm. Where I get all of my information about the Blazers in one place, and they aggregate stuff, and, they provide links, and that way I'm not messing around with stories like the stories that I write, where I have to focus on the winner no matter who's playing. So if the Boston Celtics win, then I write about, my story centers more upon the Boston Celtics and the victory than it does about, the Blazers and how many minutes Leonard got, you know. So I'm a little more, and I'm a little more general too. My stuff is the stuff that appears, you know, when you click on a link that says NBA and there's a list of stories and you get game stories from all over the country, right? That's where my stuff appears. So I'm more of a general, what I write is very general. It's very basic. It's just the facts. And I think it's great for consumers because I'm a huge soccer fan, right? So I go to soccer sites for my information.
Soccer fights? That sounds interesting too.
Soccer sites. The kids on. So that's how it's changed. Also, you know, teams now, all of that information that I used to have to look up or have to keep up track of myself, it's all there for me right there. Teams give you huge packages of notes before every game that has everything you ever wanted to know about, you know, that game. And all of those resources are also available on the internet, on basketball, the basketball statistics site also. So the stats that we have now because of media, and the resources that we have are just fantastic. It's changed my job in the fact that things like, I guess Woj kind of changes my job, and Twitter changes my job because, not a lot of people, especially in the NBA, Woj is breaking everything. So a lot of those stories now, a lot of people have to kind of depend on good writing and good stories and good storytelling to set themselves apart. And there's quite a few people that have set themselves apart with good storytelling, like Jason Quick. So, but that's kind of like an overview, I think. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that kind of is an overview of the media's changed things.
That's great stuff. I have one more follow-up, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cassidy to ask the questions that she has in mind. But it sounds like a lot of things have gotten easier over the years. But what are some things, maybe, if there are any, that have gotten harder?
Not so much for me. I think a lot of people who are in this business kind of struggle with the immediacy and the deadline pressure that, now deadlines are all the time.
Yeah.
It used to be that when you worked for a newspaper, you would have X amount of hours before they went to press that you could write your story and you could craft an excellent story. Now they, you go straight, now you go straight to your website with your story after the game. And I think also, there aren't editors anymore. Editors don't exist much anymore. So you also have to deal with making sure your copy is a lot cleaner than maybe you would have in the past.
Mm-hmm. That's something that I've noticed. And, one more. I lied. I have one more question. This is like an etiquette question. So, for your preference. So like sometimes what you just said about how it's, there just aren't copy editors and editors anymore. Like if I'm reading an article online and I notice just like a tiny little typo, it's like a misplaced comma or like, somebody like twisted their words backwards or whatever. What is the best way to alert someone so that they can fix it? Because I figure like you want it fixed, but I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I'm always like, oh, what should I do?
Well, you can always drop people an email. I guess my attitude is that people are churning out so much copy that there are going to be typos and there are going to be errors. And if you can't kind of, as a writer, accept that and you have a problem with people pointing that out to you, then, you've got issues. But I always appreciate when people reach out to me by email or by Twitter DM and say, oh, hey, I noticed that you got this guy's first name wrong or whatever. And and I appreciate that. And then I go and fix the article. So yeah, I think there's different ways to do it. If you know the writer, you're kind of familiar with them. Twitter DM, I don't think is too obtrusive.
Yeah, that way you're just like, hey, love the article. In the third paragraph, I noticed that you forgot to capitalize this word or whatever. Because I just always figure people would want to fix it if they knew. Anyway, thank you for indulging me on my questions. I will turn it over to Cassidy.
All right. Hey, Cassidy.
Awesome. And so I'm kind of wondering, we've heard about how the media has changed, but what effect do you think the media has to change the game, in particular basketball? Do you think there's an influence there that actually changes the game?
Yes, I do. I honestly do. So now teams are controlling their own messages in a lot of instances. They have their own website. Blazers have their own reporter, Casey Hodal, and they produce their own content. They also are partners with television channels, in this case, NBC Sports Northwest. And so that partnership and that kind of platform allows teams and players to connect with their fans in ways that they were never able to connect with before, right? That message was always filtered through the media in years past. Now it's not. Teams control that access and that media. And I think it has given players and fans a deeper connection and a more and a familiarity that lacked before. That actually, I think, I mean, I don't know if it's actually changed the game of basketball itself, but I think it's changed the way that fans can relate to the game, and changes the way that the team can relate to the fans. And if there's been any kind of media change to the actual game, I think it all has to do, I mean, and this is just me talking off the top of my head, but I think it has to do mostly with instant replay, because now everything is replayed over and over and over and over. And so I think that media has driven that change to the game. And all the replay rules and the 2-minute rules and things like that, I think are really the result of that.
That makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like the media influence and the influence that teams have having their own sources makes a bigger impact in smaller markets than they do the bigger market teams?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think that because the media for smaller market teams is smaller, I mean, generally, that there's one daily newspaper now that covers the Trailblazers every single day, and that's the Oregonian. So that the number of media has really diminished, the daily media. So I think that it has helped having their own platform has helped these smaller market teams kind of connect with people and kind of get their stories out.
That makes sense.
I thought of one more question. Can I ask
Awesome.
one more question?
Go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
So with LeBron moving to Los Angeles, and their first game with LeBron on the team was here in Portland. And did you cover that game?
Oh, yeah.
And what was the media like? Have you ever been part of something like that? Because I know you've covered some big deals, like World Cups and stuff.
I've covered 16 straight opening nights for the Blazers.
That's amazing.
And
so you're the person who's responsible for their winning streak.
It is. Oh my God. Yes, it is.
You're the good luck charm.
So an interesting story about that. I was covering a soccer tournament in Texas that the final was the night before that game. So I got on a flight at early in the morning the next day to come back to Portland so that I could cover that game. And AP had all of these contingency plans just in case I wasn't able to make it. Like if there was a tornado or something in Texas, they had plans to send put the guy from Seattle in his car by 2:00 in the afternoon to get him down here in time to cover that game because it was that huge. Mm-hmm. And I arrived at the arena. I think I arrived it was a 7:30 start. So I think I arrived at 4 or 3:30 and the parking lot was already full. So I had to park far away and I got to the press room and they had already told me that they were limiting credentials for the game. So I couldn't get my usual contingent of people that would normally help me on a game like that. I wasn't able to get them all in and everybody was packed in like sardines, but just interviewing Terry Stotts does a pregame at 5:15 before every game, and just doing Terry Stotts, there must have been 45 people.
Oh my gosh!
Wow. For the pregame, and that's unheard of. I mean, they're usually like about 10. Uh-huh. So it was hard to hear him and hard to get your recorder in to close enough to record him. And but the most interesting part was post game. It was a madhouse. There were so many people there, and there was so much excitement in the air. And then after the game, they did Terry Stotts did his regular post-game press conference in the place where he always does it. And there they have seating and a TV platform and the Blazers backdrop up against the wall. And he always does his home post-game shows there, or his post-game media availabilities. So there were so many media there that they couldn't fit all in the visitors' locker room at Moda Center. Uh-huh. So they said, all right, we're going to bring LeBron in here in the Terry Stotts' media area to talk to him. But the Lakers were upset that because they didn't have a backdrop that was big enough that had the Lakers branding on it. So they took away all the seats, they took away the podium, and they put LeBron on this chair in front of the tiny Lakers backdrop, and they expected all of us to like crowd around each other and try to get his post-game comments. And it was just insane. I posted a picture of it on social media. If you were not standing in the front row 30 minutes before he started, there was no way that you were going to be able to hear his comments. And there was TV, there was media from all over the world. And people were standing on chairs to try to see it and try to get photos and try to get video. And it was just absolutely insane. I'm lucky because I'm little, so I can crawl under people. But I mean, that was literally the only way I was going to get close enough to be able to speak to them or to be able to hear him, because there were so many people there. So it would have been better if they would have just, had taken any backdrop down and just had the blank wall behind LeBron and kept him at the podium. But I understand what they were trying to do. They wanted to do, they wanted to give their sponsors the publicity that they promised them. So they had to have the backdrop there. But the way it was handled was just, I think they had no idea that there were that many people. So that's the LeBron story. It got better the next time he came.
You mean it was a little more organized?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. There wasn't that crush of media that there was at the first game.
If you're there to get, recordings of what he's saying, but you're 40 feet away, do y'all just like compare notes and, share via Dropbox your stuff so people can have access to it? Or like, how does that work when
you text people the audio?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I text people audio all the time.
Oh,
so yeah, you take it on your phone, and then on all of the microphone apps, there's a little thing where you can just hit it and text it to somebody.
And since you're little, you got to get yourself way up to the front. We'll have to remember that.
I'm just imagining you crawling under reporters to get to LeBron. It's an amazing visual.
Right? And I can get away with it because, like, I'm a 53-year-old woman, so nobody thinks I'm up to no good. So
Oh, well, Anne, this has been awesome. We kept you longer than we said that we would, but I'm so glad that we got that LeBron story because that was awesome. Any words of advice for people, looking for, maybe new things to discover in the media, or for people who are interested in getting into the media?
So yeah, there's so many places that you can go now, and there's so many ways you can start out now. When I started out, you were very limited. You applied to newspapers, and you made the cut or you didn't. But there's so many different kinds of media. I don't think that, especially if you're a kid, you shouldn't limit yourself to, if you want to be a writer, don't limit yourself to being a writer. If you want to do video, don't limit yourself to doing video. In this day and age, you really need to know how to do everything. I take my own photos a lot of the time. I do video, and I also write. So the main thing is to not limit yourself and not kind of pigeonhole yourself.
Great. Well, before we go, do you want to tell people how they can find the work of Anne Peterson?
So AP has a website, apnews.com.
AP as in Anne Peterson, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so funny.
One of my colleagues used to call me AP squared. And so apnews.com, and all of AP's stories are there, and all of their sports stories are there too. You can search it, or you can put in your favorite team name, and the most recent stories will pop up there. I'm on Twitter at Annie M. Peterson, and that's Annie, ANNIEM, Peterson, all one word, on Twitter. You can follow me there. For anybody who cares, I have a Facebook page that focuses on women's soccer, and it's called AP Women's Soccer. And you can find that on Facebook. And if you can't, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll definitely send you the link. And I think that's it. I think those are the main ones. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. We really appreciate you joining us. Gave us some great stuff to share with folks.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Anytime you want to call, give me a call.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Well, that will do it for this edition of the Women's Hoops and Talks podcast. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you would like to get every edition of the Hoops and Talks podcast, you can find us in the Blazers Edge podcast feed. We release episodes every other Thursday. You can also follow Hoops and Talks at Hoops and Talks on Twitter. And one of the things that I try to do there is get on Twitter every once in a while and retweet the works that people who've been on our show have done, because we've had some fantastic women who are writing amazing things. And so I'll get on there every once in a while and share from the Hoops and Talks account some of the great work that the women who have been on the show have been doing. You can find me at TCBBiggs on Twitter. And Cassidy, where can people find you now?
I'm finally on Twitter again. You can find me at Cassidy Gemmet, Gemmet.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining me this week, Cassidy. This was super fun. I had a great time.
Awesome. Well, let's enjoy the rest of the season.
Yeah. All right. Go Blazers.
Woohoo!
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.